Stan Lee, a name known by many because of his comics. He was best known for his work with Marvel Comics because he helped create many comic book heroes we know today. For example, he was in the teams that created the heroes from Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and the X-Men. Stan Lee is one of the many comic book makers around the world that make many of us enjoy reading comics, well, Marvel Comics. But I think it could be important to understand the origins of the comic book and when they were created. So as we know, there's other companies, not as comic companies as well, like IDW and Archie, and those companies also publish their own comics that people enjoy reading today. So for my speech, I will first discuss the origin of the comic book, and second, I will discuss how comic books have evolved throughout the years. The to to start off, the earliest known comic book was was invented in the year 1837 in Europe, where it was translated into many languages, later arriving to America in 1842, which then made it the first comic book to come to America. This comic book was called The Adventures of Obadiah Oldbuck. Yeah, that's a handful to say. Which was published in several languages in 1837, like I said. And how I already mentioned, a few years later, it was released in America in 1842, making it its first published comic book in America. The book was created by Switzerland's Rodolphe Toffer, which is another hard name to say, who was recognized as the creator of the picture storybook and the comics, well, which then proceeded to become the comic. No word balloons were used yet, but the words at the bottom of each panel were added to describe what was going on in the story. So yes, it was like a mix of how picture books came to me, but then developed into comics and picture books of today. Rudolph's comic book was successful, which so successful that many authors gained his idea, like gained inspiration to make their own comic books, or so-called comic books, and this came to be known as the Victorian Age of comic books. I barely found this out myself too. Some authors took inspiration to try to attempt to make it their own. For example, Palmer Cox. He illustrated a picture book called The Brownies. Literally, the title is The Brownies, Their Book. It could be said that it is not a comic book, but it took inspiration from Rodolph's work to create it. Because of Palmer's book, the comic industry in America became successful. Now that I have discussed the origin of the comic book, I will now discuss how comic books have evolved during the passing years till now. So, we all know that for certain years, the comic book got their own age names, like the Golden Age, Silver Age, Platinum Age, or, right now we are currently in the Modern Age, I assume. For now, I will only explain two of those ages of the comic book years. So first off, we'll start off with the Golden Age. The Golden Age spanned from around 1938 and went all the way till 1956. Throughout those years, the comic book's hero, Superman's first comic issue, was released and had a major success with major sales. During World War II, comic book writing and manufacturing was high and went on to sell really well, since it was a crisis, so people needed an entertainment to distract themselves from what was going on in the world. But now that we know the most known comic book age, how about we transition to the now modern age. The modern age of comic books, which goes from 1985 till now. This is a time where comic books hit their peak with crazy ideas and new comics everywhere, and I'm sure some of you have seen them, like different universes for each superhero, like a different Superman for each universe. There were many of comic book stores, especially the superhero ones like Batman or Spider-Man, had, like I said, many universes and many reboots, story making, and different universes each comic, and they all sell well still. But now comics can be read digitally and on paper, so it's a win-win for both. So now, now to wrap up my speech today, I have discussed the origin of the comic book, and then I discussed some of the examples of how the comic book has evolved. And Marvel, IDW, Archie, these are just some examples of comic book companies that pu- that that stole the hearts of many people, and people still enjoy reading them today. And I have explained the origins of how comic books came to be. In conclusion, comic books have been almost available to anyone for almost 200 years now. Many enjoy them and many have not, but companies keep manufacturing them and making them